Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm bringing you guys a video on how I evaluate linebackers in Madden 19 and how you can build an effective linebacking core in Madden 19 in whichever mode you're trying to build a good team in, primarily franchise mode, but you could apply these as well in any of the other game modes in the game. But yeah, let's just jump right into it. Let me tell you guys what I look for in terms of linebackers, and this one might be a little bit more complicated than the previous offensive line video because the offensive line's pretty straightforward at each position. You can flip it left or right. But you can do different things in terms of the linebackers based on what type of defense you're running. So I know a lot of people like to run a 4-3 defense. There are quite a few people that also like to run a 3-4. I believe I said 4-3 first and then 3-4. Whichever. There you can run both, 4-3 or 3-4. That's all I'm trying to say. And your linebackers are going to depend quite a bit based on what you're going to do in terms of those positions. So, as you can see here on the screen, I am running a 4-3 defense, and I will get into what I do with the linebackers here in the 4-3. So primarily, whenever you're running a 4-3 defense, you're going to be trusting your defensive line to get pressure. Now, I do things a little bit differently than a lot of people do. For the most part, whenever I'm playing a 4-3 defense, I trust all four of my defensive linemen to be almost nose tackle type of players. They're all run stoppers. So what I do, even though I run a 4-3, I typically still use 3-4 style outside linebackers that can rush the passer. I like outside linebackers that have a lot of speed, agility, and acceleration. And what I do in my depth chart, and you may not do this. This could be very different depending on the team. Is at the rushing defensive end spot, I plug in my outside linebackers. So that is different for me. Keep that in mind as I go through here. I'm going to first tell you what I would say you should do if you run a traditional 4-3. With the defensive ends being the pass rushers. And I do this from time to time, but with this team I have a couple of guys that I really like pass rushing off the edge, so that's how I use them. But if you're running a traditional 4-3 defense where the defensive ends are the pass rushers, all three of your linebackers should essentially be middle linebackers. That's how they'll play, and that's how you're going to want to use them. You're going to want to be able to user any one of these linebackers at any moment, and you don't necessarily have to be able to user the linebackers. I don't typically actually user the linebackers. Most of the time I'm using a defensive lineman, maybe a safety. Occasionally I'll user a linebacker, but my style is not predicated on using the linebacker, but it still helps that these guys are mobile, agile, and able to have a lot of range to go from side to side. Because what's going to happen in the 4-3 defense, no matter what you do in terms of pass rushing, is if you're running a 4-3, all three of these linebackers you are depending on to make tackles. You're depending on them to shoot gaps, get from side to side, and stop outside runs. These are your primary playmakers on a 4-3 defense. Now, in the passing game, obviously your secondary counts quite a bit, but in the 4-3 defense, if you're trying to stop the run, these four guys are not going to be stopping them in terms of tackling them in the backfield or anything. Occasionally they'll make a play, but you're going to be trusting on these three linebackers all to be able to shift left and right and shoot gaps and make plays. So basically what I'm getting at here is if you're running a 4-3 defense and you're not really depending on your outside linebackers to be the pass rush specialists that you would be in a 3-4 defense, you're going to have these guys all be middle linebackers. And what that allows you to do is that frees you up quite a bit to sign middle linebackers and move them to outside linebacker because their pass rush skills aren't necessarily vital to what you're doing. So theoretically, I could go and trade for another middle linebacker that I like that's good at covering, and I could move him to an outside linebacker position, and he would play well in a 4-3 because he's dependent on covering and stopping the run, not necessarily pass rushing. So clear and obvious here, Luke KUECHLY is a very good linebacker. Now let's go in and look and see what makes him a good linebacker. So The things that I depend on the most for a linebacker are, one, speed. I need my linebacker to have at least 80 speed, so that's the base. You can't have your linebackers who you're trusting to go from sideline to sideline to have less than 80 speed. If you're in a 3-4 defense, your pass rushing outside linebackers that you're trusting to not drop back into coverage much or anything like that, they don't need to have that type of speed. But in a 4-3 where these guys are all off the line of scrimmage and they're moving around, potentially covering, potentially shooting gaps, these guys need to have speed. Ideally, 84, 85, or better is the prime situation for a linebacker. Now, the higher you get in speed, the better, because these guys will be more agile, they'll be more able to cover the guys that they need to cover, and they'll be quicker to get to the running back. Now, keep in mind what these guys have to deal with. So like I said, if you're running a 4-3 defense, these linebackers are covering tight ends, sometimes wide receivers, oftentimes running backs, and they're chasing down running backs. Most running backs, most wide receivers have 89 or 90 or better speed. So you want them to be close to that to be able to match that speed, and that's really important. Even if you're not usering, you want them to be able to match that speed. And primarily, they need to be fast enough to cover a tight end. And most tight ends in this game have 84, 85, 86 speed, depending on whether they're on the faster side or not. There are some slower ones, but for the most part, you want them to be faster than the tight ends at the bare minimum. So that's like 85 speed around is where it's ideal, and certainly above that helps all the more better. Now, in terms of tackling, I don't see tackling as the primary, important stat. Depending on the sliders that you're playing on, your guys are either going to make your tackles or miss their tackles. As long as they have better than 80 tackling, that's no problem at all. However, the most important stat for me, for linebackers in the 4-3 formation, for all three of these linebackers, the most important stat is block shedding. Block shedding is what's going to determine whether they're able to get in through their gaps and make tackles. If there's a lineman getting to the second level and trying to block them, it's going to determine whether they're going to be able to get off that block and make the tackle before they get a big gain. Block shedding is incredibly important for both defensive linemen and linebackers, because this is what's going to determine whether they're able to make plays or not. So the primary stats you're going to be looking for are speed and acceleration, because you want your linemen to be agile, and agility counts into that as well. You're going to be looking for block shed because you want them to get off blocks, and then you're also going to want to look for a little bit of the stats down here in the middle that you can see: pursuit, play recognition, and awareness. Those three stats all contribute to whether they recognize the play, where the ball's going, and how to play the ball. So those stats are somewhat important. You can get away with having lower stats, especially if you're using the linebacker. Pursuit, play recognition, and awareness don't matter if you're using the linebacker at all. So keep that in mind. If you have a guy, say all three of these guys I'm comfortable with, but one of them has really low awareness and play recognition, make that guy your user, because those stats become obsolete. Those stats are what control if your CPU player does his job correctly or not. So that is important to some degree. I'd say you want to look for 80 or better at those as well. And then the other stats that are pretty important for this position are strength and zone coverage. Strength is extremely important because you have to think about who these guys are going up against. So if they are trying to stop the run and make tackles and get off blocks, they're going to be going up against offensive linemen from time to time, primarily guards, who are going to have a little bit less strength than most offensive linemen. But that means that you're going to want to have at least above 80 strength on your linebackers. Anybody below 80 strength, trade them, cut them loose. They're really not valuable in any scheme. Maybe in a 3-4 scheme as a pass rusher, they can get off on a finesse move or something like that. But you want your linebackers to be strong. You want them to be agile. But you don't need crazy stats in any of these categories. Now, zone coverage, the higher the better, because you're going to be... The only time that your linebackers are going to be in coverage is when they're in zone coverage. Never put your linebackers in man-on-man coverage with anybody, because even a guy that's a 98 or a 99 like Luke Kuechly, he's not going to stay in man coverage on those guys. As you can see, even a guy like him has 77 man coverage. It's not going to happen. Now, if you're using him, obviously that changes a little bit. If you're good at man coverage as a user, by all means, just make sure that your guy has good catching or good agility and speed. That's what's going to matter for a user linebacker. But if you want them to be effective on their own without using them, make sure that they have higher zone coverage. So for linebackers, actually, high zone coverage is above 70. So Luke Kuechly is on the really high end for linebackers, and that's why you'll see him make a ton of plays over the middle as a very, very good middle linebacker. But if you look at some of the other players, they're pretty good in zone coverage. They have closer to 75 zone coverage or something like that. But as you can see with my other linebackers here, I have similar builds. So this guy, is a random rookie that I actually drafted, he's got 85 speed, pretty good acceleration. His block shedding isn't there yet, but we're getting it up there. And then he has 82 strength and 83 zone coverage. He's only a 77 overall, but that's all you need for an effective linebacker. He's quick and agile. He's able to, run from sideline to sideline and catch up to tight ends and running backs. He's going to get off some blocks because he's 76 block shed. That can improve, but he's a rookie. But he has 82 strength and 83 zone coverage. So he's going to be very capable of doing the multitasking that we need him to do as a linebacker in this scheme. So not a whole lot necessary for these positions. You just want them to overall be agile players and be able to do multiple different things. So keep in mind block shedding, keep in mind zone coverage, keep in mind their speed and agility. Those are the primary things. And then over time, you'll get their awareness and play recognition up by just upgrading them. So that is something to also keep in mind. Unless you're using the guy, you could user a guy that has just good speed. I actually have a couple guys like that on my depth chart. So I have a guy here, Brandon Copeland, who's actually a very good user linebacker, and I'll show you why. He doesn't have very good block shedding, doesn't have very good zone coverage, but what he does have, he has 87 speed and 87 acceleration, and then to top it off, he has decent strength, so he's going to be able to, power up on some guys, get off some blocks occasionally here and there, or at least not get blown off the ball. So this is a guy that you can user just because he has very good speed, very good acceleration, and good agility. So he's a guy that you can just drop back in coverage and use a tight end or try and shoot a gap with just because he's a quick guy. He's only a 73, but that would be an effective user linebacker. Now, for the other guys, these would be effective linebackers. You could go, you can find linebackers that are as low as like a 70 that would be effective at their position. You could look at Clay Matthews, who I have as the backup for all three of these positions. He's older. Don't get me wrong. He's getting up there at 33 years of age, but he's a very effective linebacker when he comes in. He's actually got like 6 sacks and a couple interceptions just as a backup linebacker. He's only got 81 speed, but he's got decent acceleration, decent block shedding, decent strength, and I use him occasionally. So he's a decent linebacker, and he's capable of, just doing his job, being versatile and playing different positions. So that's kind of what you need at this position. Basically, all three of these guys act as middle linebackers that both play zone and stop the run. So that's kind of what you want in the 3-4 defense. Now, to switch that up a little bit, what you're going to be doing in the that's what you're doing in the 4-3 defense. To switch that up, what you're going to do in the 3-4 defense is your outside linebackers are primarily going to be pass rushers. So they're going to be more like Shaq Thompson here, who I have coming off the edge and edge rushing. So what matters to me when I evaluate outside linebacker pass rushers is acceleration, strength, not strength, acceleration, block shedding, and then either a finesse move or a power move. So what you'll see here is that some of the things that matter for the 4-3 defensive linebackers, some of the things that matter for them don't matter as much for pass rushers. So Shaq Thompson here, what I'll show you is that on the season, halfway through the season through 8 games, the amount of sacks that I have with him is 9. So through an entire season, he's on pace to have 18 sacks, which is an incredible number, and he's actually my best pass rusher, but here's why. And I'll show you pretty quickly how he differs from the other linebackers in that he's not as strong, doesn't necessarily have the same ratings in terms of zone coverage or anything, but I use him differently. So he's got 85 speed and 86 acceleration, very fast off the edge, and has decent block shedding with 82, but as you can see down there, only 74 strength and only 61 zone coverage. So This is a prototypical 3-4 linebacker. You're not going to use them to drop back in coverage, and you're really not going to use them a ton to try and stop the run. I mean, they do need to be able to stand their ground, but for the most part, in a 3-4, you're going to be depending on the 2 middle linebackers to make all the plays, which is different than in the 4-3, you're depending on all 3 linebackers to make plays, where in the 3-4, you're making the 2 middle linebackers make the plays, and then these 2 outside linebackers are more there to just kind of hold their edge. So it's a little bit different in that regard. And that's why you don't need the same stats. But as a pass rushing type of player, all you need primarily is, a good block shed. And then I'm going to see if I can find I didn't see it there, his pass rush stats. You need to have one or the other pass rush stat, and what you want to focus on is one or the other in the pass rush category, finesse move or power move. So here's the thing, he doesn't necessarily have either, but as you can see, I have 9 sacks, so obviously we're doing something right there. Typically speaking, when I evaluate outside linebackers, I'm looking for a guy that has like 80 finesse move or 80 power move, somebody that's going to be able to make a move to get a sack. But a lot of times you're going to be able to scheme guys into blitzes that they'll come free. So what matters is the speed. They need to be able to get to the quarterback as 3-4 outside linebackers. They need to be able to get to the quarterback before they can get the ball off. So they need to be fast enough and quick enough and be able to shed a block or two in order to get to the quarterback before he's able to do anything. So that's my main way of evaluating 3-4 outside linebackers, is they're more pass rush focused, but primarily speed and acceleration focused. I love to have speed guys. Some good examples of good speed linebackers that are like discounts that you could get off of other teams that other people won't use quite the way that they should would be a guy like Bud Dupree. I mean, he's like my ultimate outside linebacker. 89 acceleration at the outside linebacker spot. I've had seasons where I've gotten him up to like 25 sacks, breaking records just because of that acceleration alone. And if you'll see, he doesn't have great, power move, finesse move. He doesn't even have good block shed, but it's primarily his speed, which allows him on blitzes to actually get past linemen before they're able to set up their blocks. So that's what really matters for pass rushing 3-4 outside linebackers, and that's how I evaluate linebackers. But for the most part, in a lot of people's schemes, you're going to be evaluating linebackers like KUECHLY and this rookie here that you want them to have, good range to be able to get from sideline to sideline. You're going to want them to have some decent block shedding, and you're also going to want them to have decent zone coverage. So those are the things that I look for when I'm evaluating linebackers, and that's pretty much all the positions. Next episode, we'll probably go over another offensive position. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to go. I do have a video prepared where I'm going to show you guys some of the steal hidden gems at halfback in the game, and that one will be pretty helpful for you guys. So hopefully you guys check that one out. If this video helped you at all, please leave a like on down below and subscribe to the channel for more content. I'm pretty excited about these series that we have going here, and I'm excited to help you guys out. I've gotten some comments and feedback saying that these videos have helped you guys out quite a bit, so I definitely appreciate all of your feedback. Please stick around for the next episode. I'll see you guys next time.